All righty. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I think we're just going to let a couple of folks filter in and then we'll get started. Okay, so yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and from wherever you are in the world, welcome to this week's edition of eoPERCS. My name is Elizabeth Seibert, and today it is my pleasure to introduce the next speaker in our Inclusive Fieldwork Special Seminar Series, Sean Thatcher. Sean is at the City University of New York College of Staten Island and will be giving a talk entitled A Field Course for Everyone, The Benefits of Accommodation and Inclusion in Field Experiences. So just a quick reminder for those of you who may not have been to a eoPERCS seminar before, this is just how this is going to run. We're doing a quick welcome and announcements. That's what's happening now. Then Sean will give his talk. That'll be about 30 minutes. And then it'll be followed by a moderated Q&A. After the talk, we'll have a quick break. And then Sean has agreed to stick around for a tea time. And we especially welcome students and postdocs and other early career folks to stick around and just have an informal conversation. The tea time is not recorded. And we just like to remind people that during the talk, we ask you to send your questions via chat to the eoPERCS questions host, and there will be a time to be able to ask your questions at the end of the talk as well. All right, so just a wee little bit of housekeeping is that eoPERCS really values the participation of all folks interested in the paleo sciences. And so we ask that you remember to abide by our code of conduct throughout today's seminar. Please remain muted during the seminar. You should not be able to unmute yourself, but in the off chance that you suddenly find yourself unmuted, please go ahead and mute yourself and we'll go from there. You can ask questions at any time during the seminar by chatting to the questions at eoPERCS host, that is Pedro today. And at the end of the seminar, you can send your questions in via chat, or you can use the raise hand button and we will unmute you and allow you to ask your question out loud. Just a couple of other notes. We have closed captions built into Zoom right now using Otter AI technology, and you can click the CC button in your Zoom controls to show or hide them. And then finally, just a couple of little bits of things. We ask that if you have any paleo friends, folks who are early career researchers who do excellent research, we'd love to have them join our nomination pool. So please go ahead and nominate any of your friends or yourself to give a eoPERCS talk. We'll drop a link to the nomination form in the chat shortly. We also have a weekly feedback form that we'd love for you to fill out. It is completely optional, but it just helps us get a sense of who's attending these seminars so that we can make them a better thing for everyone as we move forward. One other little bit of housekeeping is that today is actually our 100th eoPERCS seminar. So we're just going to say happy 100th seminar to the series and thank everyone who's been following along with us for the last 2 years. And enough about eoPERCS. Now we're going to move on to our awesome speaker today, Sean Thatcher. So Sean actually did his biology or his bachelor's in biology from the College of Staten Island in New York, and then did a master's in geography at Rutgers. And he's actually just become a lecturer in the Engineering and Environmental Sciences Department at the City University of New York College of Staten Island. And Sean's been doing some absolutely incredible work, both in terms of research and also in terms of improving accessibility in geosciences and in the field. And so he's going to talk to us a lot about that today. And at this point, Sean, you can take over the screen share and we'll hear from you.
All right, let's make sure I share the right screen. Give me 1 second. All right, there we go. All right, everyone. I'm excited to be here today, and good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are. Hope you're all doing well. Before my talk, I wanted to thank the Paleo Early Career Seminar for inviting me to discuss the considerations I and the groups I'm involved with take into account when creating and participating in field-based activities and what inclusive fieldwork means to me. Today, we'll be talking about a field course for everyone, the benefits of accommodation and inclusion in field experiences. This is not a comprehensive overview of course design, but provides insights on how to make adjustments to current field courses to become more accessible and inclusive, followed by an example of a more comprehensive field course intentionally designed to be accessible for all students in the field. Now, so to start off, who am I? My name is Sean Thatcher, and I graduated my master's in geography from Rutgers University in 2020, focusing on coastal resilience. During this time, I was also working as an adjunct with the City University of New York, and I'm thrilled to say that I'm a full-time lecturer at the CUNY System College of Staten Island in the Engineering and Environmental Science Department starting this fall semester. Growing up, I was always outside camping, hiking, or swimming due to my time in the Boy Scouts of America program or working at 10 Mile River Scout camps as seen on the image on the left. At 18, I suffered a spinal cord injury and as a result transitioned from an able-bodied individual and into a quadriplegic. When my injury happened 13 years ago, I thought my time in the field was over until in 2016, I connected with the International Association for Geoscience Diversity, which began to drastically change my perspective on my ability to participate in fieldwork. The IAG is a not-for-profit organization that is dedicated to the access and inclusion for people with disabilities in the geosciences. I connected with the organization in 2016 while I was looking for opportunities as an undergraduate in which I consistently failed to see someone like myself in the field. Since then, I have been involved with the organization as the chair of the student community and has opened numerous doors for me, but it's also allowed me to open up doors for others through the creation of scholarship, leadership opportunities, and general networking opportunities as well. Our vision is comprised of 4 key points: to celebrate the diverse abilities of all geoscience students, faculties, and working professionals by fostering student engagement in geoscience career pathways, develop a community of resources for faculty and student support, advance knowledge of access and accommodation within the geosciences through scientific research, and promote efforts of inclusion through collaboration in research, dissemination of instructional best practices, and professional development opportunities. As previously stated, after my injury, I thought that I was not going to be able to make my way into fieldwork due to my newfound physical limitations because Mother Nature does not follow ADA laws in the United States or similar laws internationally. Conversations with faculty members as an undergraduate or graduate student that were less willing to make accommodations in many instances, and was instead provided with the isolating museum option or other isolating activities that made it very challenging to break into these types of field-based initiatives. Along with the way that we advertise our field more broadly, such as rigorous, outdoorsy, and physically active, it made it very difficult to see myself in this field, along with others with similar limitations. To me, accessible field spaces are important because I was able to apply the theory that I was learning in the classroom into the real world setting, build confidence outside of the classroom setting, and apply this knowledge, develop more informal relationships between other students and staff, which is an important ability to network within our fields, and more recently, provide students with experiences that I did not have when I was in their shoes during my undergraduate or graduate experiences. Accessibility in the field beyond my personal positionality for students will increase the retention of students within the program, especially for students with disabilities. If you are actively creating spaces for students with disabilities to be able to participate and engage within field experiences, they will feel more included and less likely to leave for other programs on campus that they feel are more welcoming. It will also allow students to build up their own identity as a geoscientist. Being able to move being able to be in this field allows them to apply what they learned in the classroom into a real world setting. These hands-on experiences enhances the learning experience, making students more likely to pursue a job or a career in the geosciences, and hopefully even advanced degrees as well. These experiences allow students to develop the networking skills needed to be successful within their academic institutions, future careers, or even in their daily lives. It also allows them to these kinds of experiences with accessibility in mind to create a culture of inclusion that moves beyond the field course experience. This allows those involved in these types of experiences to continue to create an inclusive culture within their departments, have faculty more willing to assist current and future students, and allows students to help other students and even in their own personal lives. Disabilities can be temporary or permanent and can happen at any time. And creating these types of experiences with accessibility in mind ensures that everyone can participate when these types of surprises or unfortunate circumstances do occur. So as I previously stated, anyone could need support in the field. This could be faculty and staff along with students or support staff that are involved in the project. Students, faculty, and staff may have mobility or auditory, sensory, visual, or processing challenges that they may need support for while in the field. These spaces typically lack the traditional supports they may be accustomed to in the classroom setting. So thinking about this information and the way that we provide materials and ways to make alternative formats becomes much easier, such as making considerations when it comes to color selection, font type and size, or the availability of mobile devices as just general examples. Not everyone is comfortable to disclose or even identify as having a disability, and which prompts me to ask everyone a general question. Please raise your hand if you identify as having a disability. Great. All right. And just to move this forward, now raise your hand if you wear glasses or contacts. Awesome. So what we can see is that we had about 4 participants raise their hands initially, followed by about 7 participants raise their hands afterwards. This really means that, there are more disabilities that we give credit to in our field, that we need to be more proactive about the materials that we're making for our classrooms and field experiences that will make our jobs easier, since we were putting the work in at the beginning of these types of experiences. And it creates a culture for students to be more willing to disclose that, hey, I do need these types of supports. This also makes it easier to support students or staff that may or may not have a permanent disability, such as a broken arm, for example, that will heal later, but not in time for the field experience. In short, I will share the words of my friend, Dr. Liz Gallant, that summarizes these points very well. We want to make room for the people that we want in the room, not just the people who are currently there. Now that we have spoken about identifying those that need supports and accommodations to be able to be included in fieldwork, let's talk about some of the accommodations that can be made. Accommodations can come in a variety of different forms to assist those with different needs, including but not limited to mobility, processing, sensory, auditory, or visual challenges. When making your way into the field with a group, you need to think about how everyone will get there, how long we're going to be there, and what we will need besides the tools for research to be successful in these field-based activities. For example, let's just walk through this list really quickly. Time, how long are we going to be there? And this is a really important one for students, faculty, or staff to be able to plan what they need to do while in these types of locations. Food's an important one. People get hungry and you don't want someone passing out in the field. So bringing snacks or considering meals and even allergy options while in these types of experiences are going to be really important when making these types of accommodations. Technology, very important, as assistive technology is not necessarily the use of hearing aids or other types of mobility devices, but can include lots of different technologies such as computers, cell phones, mobile devices, and other things to facilitate that collaboration, and that is very important. Transport is also one that we need to consider. How is everyone going to get there? Does someone need an accessible van? Are there policies that your institution has about renting these types of vehicles or even caravanning? These are all things that you need to consider when you're planning out these types of activities. Mobility is also a big one. When you go to the field site, are there curb cuts to go from a parking lot into a specific location? Are there no parking spots? Is it very sandy material that you're going to go see? These make it very difficult for certain types of mobility devices. Assistance is also something that you need to consider as well. Some individuals will typically need someone to assist them in their own daily lives. That person sometimes is me, where I typically have a personal assistant that goes with me from one place to another to help me with general things like opening doors or making sure that things are accommodating in general. This is just a short list. This is by no means comprehensive, but these are all the types of things that you're going to need to consider. Now, brainstorming alternatives with your team has lots of different benefits, and one accommodation can actually be a barrier for another. For example, if you are hard of hearing or deaf and you do not have a sign language interpreter while you are trying to communicate via walkie-talkies from one person to another, that accommodation could help someone who is less mobile and unable to get to the field, but is more of a burden for someone who cannot understand what is coming through that walkie-talkie because you do not have that interpreter. So these types of brainstorming activities can help adapt plans in the field for everyone when surprises do arise, and including the voices of those that need accommodations in these types of conversations are really going to enhance this type of accommodation and solution solving that are going to be really important while in the field. So scouting field locations before students arrive is a necessity to ensure that the locations meets the needs and learning objectives set forth by the instructor designing the experience. But while there, it is also important to look at this location for more than just the instructional content. So for example, you want to see the parking. How far is it from one location to another? Are there parking spots for an accessible vehicle if needed? Are there enough spots for all the students going on these types of trips as well? Are there bathrooms at these locations? Is there water available at these locations? So for example, in the United States and even more internationally, heat waves have been a huge issue, and not having water while in the field is a huge problem. Having enough shade and benches or seats for individuals that are suffering from heat exhaustion or heat stroke, hopefully not, or even those with mobility issues, just to be able to sit down and take a break as they are getting prepared to move from one location to another are things that you also want to consider. Weather and climate are also very important when figuring out what you're going to be doing in the field, and allow students and faculty and staff to be prepared for if you do have inclement weather on those days. What time are you arriving and what time are you departing are also very important to know what you're going to be able to have time for when you're visiting these locations. And it also makes it easier for students going on these trips to really plan their schedules around it. Is there Wi-Fi available at these locations? This allows you to use various types of technologies that you may not be considering in general, and allows you to really come up with some really clever and unique solutions. Along with safety. Safety cannot be underrated when you're going into the field. You do not want to have surprises arise where there are unsafe conditions, and being able to address the general safety needs for the locations that you're going to is very important, especially if someone is less likely to be familiar with the location that you're going to. It's also important to share this information directly with students so they understand what they can expect in the field to ensure that they are prepared academically and physically when arriving at the field site. So this is a list that's been adapted from toilet stops in the field, an educational primer, and recommended best practices for field-based teaching. So this allows us to see the location. So being as specific as possible, such as providing the GPS coordinates or the actual physical address of the site you're going to. The weather forecast, link to an appropriate and closest weather station. That way you don't have to go back and edit this every single year. You can click on the hyperlink and really let your students know, these are the types of weather conditions that we could experience. The objective, what's the goal here? What are we going to do here? The activity, what activity is being planned? Letting students know this is what you should be prepared for. An assessment, what are they handing in or how are they being graded? These are all very important when considering the types of things that students are going to be prepared for, so they know exactly what you're looking for while in the field. The logistics, and this could be a list of many of the bullet points that we spoke about just previously that are listed on the left. The safety notes, state safety concerns for each of the possible sites. Not everyone may be comfortable in the field or may be accustomed to going into the field, or maybe they're in a different location and not familiar with the location at all. Letting them know what you can do in these locations are very important. Relevant modules are really just a list of topics that you're going to, that are relevant to the module that you're doing. So think of them as keywords. And lastly, there's relevant readings. That way, if students want to front load before they go there, they can read the material and be more accustomed to the site that they're going to. Now, not every location needs to meet the criteria of physical access that we spoke about on the left side of your screen currently. And in the infamous words of Howard Stark in Iron Man 2, everything is achievable through technology. This quote resonated with me after my injury, but since March 2020, we have all learned that remote opportunities are a more viable option than we've given credit for prior to a global pandemic. As we are beginning to adjust to this new normal, it's important to remember how useful these technologies were for adapting our learning experiences, such as lectures, labs, or conferences. In many cases, conferences are now hybrid and eliminates the financial barrier to travel, allowing more people to attend and broaden their educational networks and reach new audiences. And there's applications for this in fieldwork as well. So when designing accessible field experiences, it's also important to consider how to support students, faculty, and staff, especially when field sites are less physically accessible for students with mobility or other challenges. The physical accessibility of a site can change from one day to the next due to inclement weather potentially washing out roads or making them exceptionally muddy, or even possible road closures, such as ones that arise due to fires, or even if illnesses arise on the day of the experiences, on the day they were scheduled, along with other physical barriers that could limit the site for all participants. Illness in this instance can be for anyone, especially given the current state of the world, and not specifically those with medical conditions. When problematic access in the field arises because of these aforementioned possibilities, technology is an excellent way to overcome these physical barriers through a combination of synchronous and asynchronous access to individual field sites. Now, this can be accomplished through a variety of different ways, as we can see in the top images, such as live streaming from if there's a strong signal available, or through recorded video to be shared later when entering a location with limited or no signal at all. Walkie-talkies to communicate between location when a signal is not available and a site is not physically accessible, or even through a phone call if a cellular signal does exist. Taking pictures of a physical site to share with those that cannot access a location to provide them with significant details of the site is also incredibly important, along with establishing, if you have the funds for, a local area network tower system to provide an array of synchronous and asynchronous options that I will discuss momentarily in the future. Peer learning is also an excellent option when field sites that are mostly accessible or when locations have opportunities for remote and physical analysis. In the examples below, we can see a group of students with and without physical limitations at the base of a blocky lava flow, analyzing a sample collected. This allows students to engage with material in ways that they could not if they were given an alternative assignment, such as that museum option that I mentioned before, along with allowing them to take an active role with their peers in the experience. Peer learning is also possible when some are participating asynchronously through briefings, debriefings, and sharing resources for those in the field site, and for those utilizing other data sets remotely, providing a variety of different perspectives while interpreting the same field location. So this allows me to talk about the Geospace program, or the geoscientists promoting accessible collaborative experiences is an accessible and inclusive planetary and geologic science field course intended to provide access to those with and without physical limitations through the University of Florida in Northern Arizona's volcanic field. This field course was designed to combine 14 in-person participants and 14 virtual participants through a hybridized approach, utilizing technologies to promote synchronous and asynchronous collaboration while in unique field locations ranging from Meteor Crater and the Grand Canyon, Espy Crater and Grand Falls, along with numerous stops along the way, including a mystery location for students to conduct their own field projects. The PI on this project is Dr. Anita Marshall, a faculty member at the University of Florida and executive director of the International Association for Geoscience Diversity. During the pilot year of this program, we were in the volcanic field for 11 days and worked to create an accessible and inclusive experience for our undergraduate and recent graduate students. So before we brought students into the field, Dr. Marshall and Dr. Jennifer Piatek visited more than 25 different locations in Arizona, from Phoenix to Flagstaff, to evaluate the accessibility of each location to begin thinking about how we would bring students with physical limitations to each of these field sites. There's a great picture of them below on the first day of their journey, and they experienced a lot of exciting things and had so many great photos. So feel free to reach out to them if you have any questions about how they were going about this process. Now, each of these locations were evaluated for a variety of different conditions. So the physical access, can we get there in the vans? Can we get there with an accessible van? And many other aspects along that as well. Are there curb cuts? What is it really sandy conditions? A lot of things of those nature. Roads, are these roads really good? Can we get on them? Are they washboarded? And other factors along those lines. The distance, how far are we going from where we're parking the vehicles to where our field locations are? Connectivity, is there a cellular service in these locations, or are there not? And this was very important when we were troubleshooting the different types of activities that we were going to be doing in these locations. Water availability was also a very important one, especially since we're in northern Arizona and it's a desert and can be exceptionally dry. So hydration, hydration, hydration. Safety was also a big concern, and preparing students to access a location that may have never been in a desert before was something that we tried to communicate with students consistently. While these locations were being evaluated, discussions were occurring between faculty members about what activities could be conducted between our in-person and virtual participants. Collaboration and mentoring were key aspects of this project, and we wanted to ensure that when in-person students were doing activities, our virtual students could be involved as long as the connectivity issues were not a problem. In locations where connectivity was going to be a problem, we began talking about activities virtual students could be doing to ensure that academic development and encouragement with in-person and engagement with in-person students was possible when we returned to locations with a strong internet signal. During this pre-trip site selection, over 25 different locations were evaluated and approximately 12 were selected to present an overview of the geologic setting, observe unique geologic structures, and begin to develop the skills to think critically about the mystery location that we'll discuss momentarily as well. Also, prior to students going into the field, we began crafting a code of conduct to ensure that the community we were trying to build during this experience was going to be welcoming to all students and staff involved during this project. During this period of time, we crafted several specific areas we wanted to address, including expectations for students, expectations for faculty and staff, roommate agreements, safety and ethics, a policy for COVID-19 during the field experience, and how to report incidences if they arose to ensure all students were supported appropriately. Although faculty and staff members created the bare bones of this code of conduct, its creation was not a one-way street. For each section, we had prompting questions for each student to contribute to ensure that they were as much a part of the creation of this code of conduct as faculty and staff were, along with including an open comment period for students to read and address things that we may have missed during its initial creation. From there, we synthesized the comments that students provided both in person and virtual and created the final code of conduct as well for everyone involved during the project design. The input and design of the code of conduct provide ownership in the culture being created during this experience for students and assisted in facilitating discussions to the field experience to prepare students for what to expect while in this type of an experience. Now, during the first few days in Arizona, we participated in a tour called the Holy Tour, a unique introduction to the geologic setting of Arizona, because not all holes in Arizona were created through the same processes. Some are Mars, which are created when groundwater comes into contact with molten material and creates holes in the ground. Others are sinkholes from the dissolution of limestone. Some are extraterrestrial in origin through meteorite impacts, and many others are volcanic, such as the creation of cinder cones within the volcanic field themselves. During this process, we included Dr. Dave Williams from Arizona State University, who was a key asset here as he presented this trip many times as an instructor, but also participated in this type of trip as a student. So this double perspective provided us with a lot of information when designing and improving upon the experience for our own cohort. While Dr. Williams was presenting the geologic setting to our in-person students, we were also live streaming his lectures to our virtual participants in locations that had a strong cellular signal. And in locations where a strong signal did not exist, we recorded the lectures and uploaded them for our virtual students to listen to when we were in a better location capable of uploading these lectures while in Flagstaff. And you can see that Dave here was doing some really great work, and you can see that we were recording and taking pictures of all these different locations to allow our virtual students to be included in all aspects of this course. Our virtual students were vital to the success for our in-person students, and much of the work conducted by our in-person students could not have been accomplished without the direct instruction from our virtual student cohort. Every morning, our virtual participants would provide a mission briefing on the field location we were going to observe that day. Our virtual participants acted as mission control and were provided with data the day before in-person students would arrive at a unique field site ranging from remotely sensed data sets, including Landsat, Sentinel, and Aster, digital elevation models to understand the topographic changes spatially of the field location, and other imagery from Google Earth and associated historical imagery to see how the landscape itself has changed over time. Our virtual students would observe and analyze these data sets during the day and develop a series of questions for these locations and brief the students in the morning prior to them attending these field sites. So they provide us with lots of information such as the geologic setting and pose questions for them to investigate while at the field site. This allowed our virtual students to guide the actions of our in-person students, providing them with ownership of the project and ground truthing their own personal observations. These briefings were also vital for our in-person students who had limited information while at the field sites due to limited internet connectivity, sun glare, and technological devices, or engaging in other types of activities while in the field. So at the top here, the top image, you can see that we have a briefing on SP Crater, along with field questions down below later on in the lecture provided by our virtual team. So this approach was demonstrated exceptionally well at the SP Crater location, with our virtual students proposing questions related to investigating the composition of lava flow at the base and the summit, observe vegetation changes while making their way to the peak of the volcano, identify if there were different textures on the lava flow they observed from the remotely sensed imagery, and compare different aspects of the lava flow at the base and the side lobes as well. This required our in-person students to separate into groups to be able to answer these questions, communicate their findings with each other, and then share them with our mission control upon returning to a stronger signal in Flagstaff. Not all of our students were physically capable of ascending the summit of SP Crater, and the questions provided to students from mission control allowed them to participate to the best of their abilities to investigate interesting structures at the base of the volcano as well. This allowed all students to participate equitably in fieldwork at the locations and contribute to the overall information presented back to mission control at the end of the day. So here we can see in the top left image that we are investigating a bunch of the lava flows at the base of the summit of the volcano that extended in a very long trajectory, which provided lots of opportunities to check out different structures. You can see that some students were able to make their way to the summit of the volcano and were able to investigate the crater and the spatter at the top, as you can see in the top right image. We also allowed students to test out other technologies, such as drones at the base of the summit, which you can see at the bottom left image, and also provided ownership for students that were a little less physically mobile and provide them with those feelings of, I felt like I could never be involved in these types of experiences, along with sharing our own experiences during these types of experiences in the past as well. Very specifically, the student in the bottom right corner was thrilled to be involved in a project that had not only one faculty member in the wheelchair, but two, to really begin to see themselves in the field doing work that they were very interested in doing themselves. Our students were very busy becoming acquainted with this type of technique during our trip, and we decided to challenge them even further by presenting them with a mystery site that has been poorly studied in the past and has no prior publications. And this allowed us to ensure that all of the observations made by mission control and our in-person students were uniquely their own. Just like the example of SP Crater, mission control was presented with information on this location before our in-person students could visit the site and presented their observations to them, but also identified limitations with the data sets as well that they were provided with, such as pixel resolution and limited historical observations from aerial imagery to draw a lot of really interesting insights of the location prior to arrival. So this inspired several questions from our mission control for our in-person students to investigate in the field, and it created a unique opportunity for students to collaborate with each other and share their findings from a top-down perspective and a site perspective as well. After this presentation of the field site, we presented students with 5 different groups to self-organize into, including stratigraphy, mapping, mineralogy, photogrammetry, and communication. Our 5 groups consisted of both person and virtual students to collaborate with each other and develop an action plan prior to their arrival in the field. This allowed them to take advantage of the limited amount of time they would have to collect data and synthesize information collected into a presentation for the rest of the group later on. This also required groups to work collaboratively as they had many overlapping questions and depended upon each other to set up necessary technology they would need in the field to refine their action plans and be successful in their endeavors. So while in the field, students worked together to set up technologies that include local area network towers, as seen in the bottom right image, to allow students to effectively communicate with each other in the field and with our virtual students. Ground control points were set up and measured using real-time kinematics, as seen in the top left image, to create accurate models of the field site using photogrammetry techniques, and established a base camp as the hub for the technology and the communication center to mission control. Students were allowed to investigate the field site and get a feel for the structure and the setting, allowing the local area network towers to be tested to ensure the signal strength. Upon investigating the field site initially, we began live streaming from the field site to share observations between in-person students with mission control, allowing them to ask questions and collaborate with their peers. While in the field, we can see that we were flying drones observed in the top left image, and students were investigating and mapping the stratigraphy as seen in the top right image. Utilizing photogrammetry techniques, a 3D model of the field site was also created that allowed everyone to make accurate measurements using Agisoft software, along with providing perspectives for those that had less mobility to get a better idea on what the field site looked like beyond just the base camp itself. It also allowed students to better analyze the outcrops being observed in this location after we left when we were synthesizing their observations. Photographs and collected samples from our stratigraphy and mapping groups were also collected to allow them to do some basic geochemical work, utilizing some of the resources at Arizona State University to identify various mineralogy and accurately detail the lithology of the region. After leaving the field site, students collaborated with each other to synthesize their observations into information that they were able to present to mission control and present their findings to the group at large. All 5 of these groups that were collaboratively with each other exceed all of our expectations and made unique observations that surprised and impressed faculty, along with inspiring new lines of thoughts for our future cohorts. Despite the successes, we did learn some lessons to enhance the program for next year's cohort. One of these was to ensure that the connectivity at remote field sites is improved upon next year by utilizing our local area network towers at more locations. Students believe that the live streaming of these locations were beneficial as they could ask questions in real time alongside their peers and presented a more robust explanation of the area during typical working hours across time zones. We also needed to improve upon communicating changes between our in-person students and our virtual students, such as changes in the schedule due to surprises, including road closures, traffic, power outages, and provide additional office hours virtually to assist students to answer questions they may have during the field experiences, and provide them with more interaction between the two groups during downtime to create a more cohesive cohort. Our in-person groups also identified that they would like more training on technology being used, such as more time to practice with the drones and photogrammetry software, more training on how to collect data using the iPads that were provided to them, along with some shorter training sessions to allow them to absorb more information over an extended period of time rather than all at once. Since we are extending the field experience from 11 days to 14 days next year, we are hoping to be able to tackle these challenges head on to enhance learning experiences for all students involved, whether they are in person or virtual. If you are interested in becoming involved with the Geospace program or other programs to create accessibility and inclusivity within the geosciences, I encourage you to join the International Association for Geoscience Diversity. For both programs, we do have openings coming up, which we are really excited to share. The application for the 2023 cohort for the Geospace program will open up next month and can be found at the URL below. We are also interested in both undergraduate and graduate students to encourage you to apply or reach out with questions if you're interested in this type of an experience. The International Association for Geoscience Diversity is also looking for a new chair for the student community and executive counselors. And the executive counselor is an excellent position for early career professionals looking to diversify the geosciences and work towards making it more accessible and inclusive for all people. The chair of the student community is an excellent position for graduate students or upper level undergraduates that are interested in advocating for and creating new opportunities for students in the geosciences. While not a comprehensive walkthrough of the development and implementation of an accessible field experience, we believe that with technology and planning, field experiences can become accessible and inclusive for all students, independent of personal limitations. Accommodations can benefit anyone that may or may not identify as having a disability, and being proactive about accommodation makes adaptation of materials easier and usable for all during these types of experiences. We also believe that a hybrid approach to fieldwork can enhance the learning outcomes for all students, whether or not they are capable of entering the field or not. In this experience, we work towards enhancing the educational outcomes for all students, independent of personal limitations, while consistently promoting the academic rigor that field courses should emphasize. Lastly, we also believe that creating an accessible and inclusive culture for fieldwork encourages students to begin to work together to overcome barriers in their personal and professional lives to begin identifying more as geoscientists. I want to thank again Paleo Early Career Seminar for inviting me to this talk, and I look forward to your questions. Just very briefly, I just wanted to share on the screen resources for everyone that were mentioned in this talk. That way you can find them on your own if you're interested as well. Thank you again.
All right, well, thank you so much, Sean, for that really, really excellent talk and walkthrough of this really cool project, as well as just the considerations for making the field more accessible. So a reminder to the audience is that you can ask questions from Sean by sending your questions via the chat to the questions at the eoPERCS host, that is Pedro today. And you can also, if you would like to, use that little raise hand function, and we will allow you to unmute and ask your questions. We actually have a couple of questions that have come through during the talk, so I'm going to start with those and we'll go from there. I also will mention that I'm going to drop the questions into the chat, so there will be a text version of the question as well. So our first question is from Sundar Sarwan, who has asked, how has virtual solutions like AR, VR, or a gamified field setting helps diverse communities in learning, especially from a remote learning perspective?
So we did not use AR or VR during these projects, but they are a very useful tool to assist students in these types of field experiences. Basically, it's a way for you to bring the field into a educational setting that's more secure and safe, especially for those that may or may not be able to enter the field. It is a very useful technology, but I very strongly encourage you not to consider that as the only option. For a lot of these experiences, creating and facilitating that inclusive and collaborative experience is very vital to the effectivity of these types of field experiences. So just make sure when you're implementing these types of activities that you're not providing that as a other option. We're trying to include everyone in these types of experiences independent of personal abilities. So making sure that you do have that engagement is going to be very vital to their implementation. I'm very interested in using AR and VR technologies to bring the field into the classroom setting. And I do hope to work towards that one day in the future.
Excellent. Thank you. So our next question is an anonymous question that says, thanks for a really fantastic talk. If you can talk about it without breaking confidentiality, as you've run several accessible trips, what are some accommodations that were initially surprising for you or that you didn't initially anticipate?
So we were very diligent about preparing for a lot of these accommodations. So let me just jump back for a slide very quickly to that list that I had before. Hopefully I don't misclick. Oh, I already did. Give me 1 second, please. Oh no, the technology is failing me. Okay, so when we were designing these, we were very much so keeping all these bullet points in mind, right? So where can we find parking, the distance to each location, bathrooms and water locations, shade, benches, seats, weather and climate, mostly because most of our students haven't been in the desert before, the arrival and departure times, Wi-Fi signal, and safety, along with these types of accommodations as well. So the biggest challenge that we did have was we did assess all of the roads when we were there, but washboarding of the roads did occur, which did prevent some of the vehicles to access some of these field sites. So fortunately, in this instance, all of the students were capable of being able to make it to the field sites, but being more aware of this washboarding in the future to really troubleshoot different options is something that we are going to take into consideration moving forward as well. So hopefully, we don't have this problem next year, but if we do, we are much more capable of adapting to them, knowing that it does happen. And this really falls into the, you can make all these different plans, right? But sometimes surprises do happen upon visiting the site previously, and then when you arrive there the next time.
I feel like that's a lesson in everything about field work, not just accessible field work, is that you can think you know, and then something will change.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, this next question says, I love the idea of mission control from virtual students. How did you guide the students with such limited contact time? It sounds like they were about a day ahead of the in-person team, and this seems like a lot to juggle as a trip leader.
Yeah, so we had faculty member working with our remote team, and really to help them go work through these data sets and being able to begin working on processing the data sets. So really allow them to take ownership of what they were learning to ensure that they were developing skills relevant to remote sensing and data analysis. That way they were intimately involved in the learning process. We did learn that we need to have a little bit more structure in regards to the materials that are being provided. So we are really excited that we have a full-time person to work on a lot of these materials moving forward. That way they can not only continue to enhance the program itself and gain the technical skills that we're striving for them to develop to enhance these learning activities, but also to more effectively manage them while we are in a location that may not have a strong signal. So it was a challenge. We did use other technologies for text-based communication. We made very effective use of Discord, so created a Discord channel so we could share questions between participants in a group setting. That way, if we couldn't get a video chat up and running, we could also send those text-based things going back and forth that could be monitored by faculty to ensure that they were being answered as promptly as possible when we were returning to a place with location, with signal, but also to allow them to be able to casually hang out and ask those questions more informally as well.
Excellent. I just want to note that we have 2 questions left, but one of the questions that asked this said, when you didn't have good cell signal, how are you able to communicate with the virtual participants so they knew what was happening with last minute changes? And I think you covered that, but if there's anything else you'd like to add there.
So, so the only thing that I would like to add is that we did have one day that was a really good experience for our virtual students to see surprises that can happen while going to field sites. So one of the things were, as many of you know, there was a fire that happened there not too long ago, the tunnel fire, and it did change some of our plans with road closures and park closures. So there was a day that just really was not working out for our in-person students, and really seeing that our in-person students were actually struggling from an accommodation perspective, and that our virtual students worked fantastically well that day, really did provide that experience of, oh, okay, you know, communication can be a challenge or in locations that may or may not have signal, but also even when you're in person, not everything is going to go according to plan. And it was a very good experience for all people involved.
Excellent. Okay, so we do have a couple more questions coming in. So I'm going to remind folks that you can send questions via chat, and we'll just keep reading questions until we run out of them. So this one is from Simon Crawhurst, who says, thanks, Sean, for the great talk. Are there any tips for adapting or using modified wheelchairs in geological field locations?
So are there any tips for adapting or using modified wheelchairs in a geological field location? So I use a power wheelchair, and depending on how comfortable someone is using it, you can do a lot of really great things with them. So you can use them to carry really heavy bags if you're not going long distances. And my family utilizes that all the time. I love being able to carry everyone's stuff. You can also use it for a bunch of different other things as well. So every once in a while, if someone needs something to lean on and someone's very comfortable and close, you can also allow that as well. So, in a location where you may or may not have that kind of a setting where seating is available or readily available, working together in that collaborative space, as long as everyone's comfortable, is a possibility. Wheelchairs are very much so a evolving thing where the capabilities of them, depending on the type of chair that's being used, can do a lot of really interesting things. So you can be able to tie on different types of equipment and things like that, and really make them an active participant rather than this lone person who's sitting on their own. As long as they're not surrounded by sand or light gravel, that way they can actually get around and not become part of the field site in the future. But so there's a lot of options in there, and asking those that are in these types of devices are going to be the ones that are going to come up with some really unique solutions here. So you don't want to make assumptions about them, but you definitely want to ask them, what are you comfortable with? Do you have these types of ideas or suggestions?
I love that they make the wheelchair an active participant in the course as well.
Absolutely. It is a technological device and a mobility device, and it can break down a lot of doors in a physical sense, but also in a metaphorical sense.
Excellent. All right, so currently our last question, but if anyone has any last burning questions they'd like to add, feel free to add them in. This one is also from Sender, and it asks, has this hybrid method also been applied in field trips to fluvial or marine environments or other sort of specialized trips? If so, do these accommodations change for the different kinds of environments?
So I have not been directly involved in these types of initiatives. However, I will be designing a field course for my own institution at the College of Staten Island for next semester, and I am planning on making it more of a marine field-based experience. So for those types of experiences, things that I'm currently thinking about are the sand issue, because I cannot navigate my wheelchair on sand, for example, and ways to incorporate that. There are groups that are thinking about this in general, and I have been involved in trips that are in marine settings from Rutgers University, specifically through the climate change resource, the Coastal Climate Risk and Resiliency Program. And the Rutgers Climate Change Institute also has been working towards this as well. Also, the Jacques Cousteau Estuary Research Reserve, hosted by Lisa Mueller, was very accommodating when we were doing a summer field course on the Jersey Shore. So there are examples of very successful things, but they didn't necessarily use this hybrid model. I am going to be planning on doing that in my own field course, but that's an active area that I'm considering in the future.
Fantastic. All right, this was really, really fun, Sean. Thank you so much for the talk and also for a great Q&A. At this point, we will go ahead and close out the formal portion of the seminar, which mostly means that I'm going to take over your screen share and say thank you for a fantastic talk and also for joining us. You all, I hope, can see my slides, right? Yes. Excellent. It's that double screen thing. So thank you all for joining us. We'd like to remind folks to please fill out the weekly feedback form. We'll drop the link to that in the chat, as well as the nomination form. We'd like to invite everyone to join us again next week when we're going to hear from Jasmine Scarlett from the University of East Anglia in the UK, talking about volcanoes in popular video games, inaccuracies, and pedagogy. So that will be great fun. Up next, Sean has graciously agreed to stick around for tea time. And so this is an informal conversation in a relaxed setting. And our question of the week is, if there were absolutely no barriers whatsoever for accessing a location, where would you want to explore? And so at this point, we're going to have a little break. I've got a 3-minute timer here, so you can get up, walk around, have a drink of water, come back in about 3 minutes, and we strongly encourage paleo pets. So if you've got paleo pets, you can bring them to tea time too. And I will just remind you that tea time is not recorded, so this is just a fully informal post-talk conversation. So at this point, I'm going to just start that timer, and we'll see, hopefully, some of you back in a few minutes. Oops. Maybe we start this timer. There we go.